I'm Kayla, and for the last time this season, you are tuned in to Climate Action Figures. Do, 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 do.
Do, 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 do. Hello and welcome to the final edition of Climate Action Figures for this season. My name is John Whidden, and this week on the show you'll get to hear more from our creative consultant Kayla. But first, this week's Quick Fix. Linda E. from Calgary, who has sent us several Quick Fixes this season, emailed to say, my 91-year-old mom, named Osa, is a climate action hero. Tonight, she told me that as a part of her effort to use less water this summer, she is going to keep a small bucket beside each of her sinks and use the water that she runs while waiting for the hot water to come up from the heater in the basement to flush her toilet. Granny genius. It's the little things. That is for sure, Linda. Thank you very much for that. And welcome back, Kayla.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
And we always ask our guests, as you know, what are your thoughts on that Quick Fix?
First of all, I love the name Osa. I don't think I've ever heard the name Osa before. I love that she's 91 too and doing these awesome things. So those are some of the things that I loved about that Quick Fix. But the actual content of the Quick Fix itself is great. I haven't thought of that either. And it takes a lot of water to warm your tap up, and there's a lot of water that gets lost when you're trying to warm it up. So great ideas.
And granny genius. Well put, Linda.
Granny genius. Yeah, for real.
So, listener, we are going to talk a little bit about this season, a little bit about next season, just to wrap things up. And at Climate Action Figures, we like to be prepared for interviews. But Kayla and I both value naturally flowing conversations. So what we're going to do is each of us is going to ask the other a surprise question. Kayla knows this, I know this, but neither of us know what the question is that the other has prepared. So who's going to start, Kayla?
You start us off, John.
Okay. Actually, I have two questions. I'm cheating, but one's going to be very...
Okay, wait. What?
One's going to be super easy, I hope. The first question is, Kayla, will you join us again as creative consultant next season?
Well, John, I'm sorry you have to find out this way. No, I'm kidding. I'll be back. I'll be back.
I didn't actually know that, so I'm happy you answered that one.
Yeah, that was a real question. That's so funny.
Okay, the real question, well, that was the real question, but here's the other question I had been thinking about, which is, we are going to talk about our guests a little bit from past season and next season, but we don't, of course, choose one over the other because we've talked many times about how we've enjoyed certain aspects of every guest that we've had on. Everybody has been wonderful. But when you think back to this season, Kayla, is there a moment that jumps out at you or something a guest said that leaps out?
Oh, man. I loved the part about the goats.
The goats?
Okay. So the goats, that's from the Lacombe Ecovision episode. I've heard about different programs in schools about having ecologically friendly and climate change centered courses, but none where you can take care of goats. So that was really fun and really fresh. So that stuck with me as well.
Okay, very good. Now I guess it's my turn in the hot seat.
You didn't specify for a surprise question if it was supposed to be about the podcast. So my question to you, John, you did not. If you had a superpower, what would be your superpower?
Oh my goodness. That is a great question. You know, Kayla, what I think of is a TV show that was on years ago called Early Edition, where the guy got the newspaper a day ahead. And so he knew what was going to happen the next day. And it was interesting because at first he tried to use that power to make lots of money in the stock market, but it wasn't fulfilling. So he started to do good things with it. Like he would see that someone was going to get hit at this intersection and killed. And so he'd go there and divert the thing from happening. And it was interesting because no one ever would thank him for it because they had no idea why he jumped out in the middle of traffic. That would be a pretty cool superpower. But then the burden of it would be a big thing too, because
that's a lot of responsibility.
And what do you do with that power? So Oh boy, tricky question. Okay, let's go with that. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and then I'll live with it.
Wow.
Good question. Thank
Wow.
you.
That's
And it kind of goes with
intense. No problem.
our podcast, right? Climate action
Oh
figures.
yeah. Climate action figures.
Now, this season, Kayla, we had a lot of interesting features. Did you have favorite features?
Oh man. I love Gumby, and I don't see him right now. I've been looking. Where is
Yes,
Gumby?
Gumby appears if you're watching on YouTube at some point in the background. You've got to figure out where Gumby is, but maybe you're having trouble finding Gumby today. You never know.
Oh,
So
there he is. There's Gumby.
I always wanted to make Gumby appear from the side in case you're just listening, and Gumby just made an ultra close up. Usually he's hiding back in the plant or something, so it's hard to find.
Yeah, we had the QuickFixes, of course. I loved hearing all of those. And of course, a lot of people seem to really love like what gives you hope, which is so much fun. It's always nice to hear really uplifting things, and that's what the whole podcast is about. So having that little bit in the end, hearing from all of the guests for what gives them hope, gives everyone hope.
Right. That was the idea for sure. I have to say we got a lot of feedback on that one too. That seemed to be a big feature for people.
Of course, for everyone listening back at home, if there's any other features you want to see, you've got some great ideas, let us know and we'll be sure to include that in the future.
Yeah, dream up some new feature for us and send it to us, and we'll see if we can incorporate it next season. Were there any surprises for you this season, Kayla?
Gosh, surprises. I don't think so. I think I kind of got what I was hoping for as from like a listening perspective. No, not too many surprises from my end. What about you, John?
I guess there were a few, but the biggest surprise for me was the feedback we got from older listeners. You know, this podcast is designed as a place for young people to share the little things they're doing about climate change. And so I sort of assumed that most of the listeners and viewers would be young people, but I've had a lot of feedback from older people who are really moved by the things the younger people are doing and getting hope from that. So that's been a bit of a surprise, a positive surprise for me.
A lot of the content is about young people, which I also like that it kind of surrounds young people, but it's not an exclusive club, you know? So it's nice that it's also for everyone.
Sure.
Speaking of feedback, we got lots of really great feedback, but there was a couple, I know some really interesting bits of feedback. For the most part, people were extremely supportive, sending really great messages. But we also got a couple that allowed us to think really critically about why we do what we do. And somebody was asking us, these things that you're saying on the podcast, aren't they just really small and they're not actually that big of a change maker? They're not really going to make a difference.
Right, what's the
point? Know, they might be referring to the QuickFixes, but even some of the projects that might only affect like kind of on a local scale or just educating students. And you know what? That is a really good point to bring up. One of these things isn't going to radically affect the course of history, but you don't know that. And also, it's just really nice to encourage people to enact small bits of change, because the goal is change at large. But how is that achievable by one person? It's really overwhelming. So if we've heard this a lot, but doing really small things together does create something larger. And that's the whole point of what we're doing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We're hoping that that's the message that gets across to people, that, yeah, we know that these small things are small, but the idea is that they could change into really big things eventually.
And one of the goals of this podcast, as you know, is to encourage young people not to be discouraged to the point of inaction, put the blinders on and just say, okay, I'm just going to ignore what happens. And my hope personally is that as they grow older, their actions blossom into game changers.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know what the future looks like. And if you get too discouraged about what the current situation is, then it's not going to change if we don't. Now, one thing that I have to know, John, what is the fate of our beloved mustache? I heard a rumor
it's beloved,
that
is it?
It's going to leave us and
well,
and spread its wings.
Okay, at the beginning, it was a great feature. And, you know, I was recognized even once in public because of it, as we talked about. But the podcast now has a life of its own, I think, without the stash. So what do you think if we moved on from it?
You know what? Although it is beloved, I think we can say goodbye if it's time to say goodbye. I'm okay with that. And I'm sure our listeners will be too.
Yeah, I love it too, Kayla, but I think probably it's time to move on. And no one will be more pleased than Colleen, my wife.
Yeah, she'll probably be the most excited. This will be her favorite episode out of the entire season because the mustache is finally leaving. Okay, now for those of you not watching on YouTube right now, feel free to check out our Instagram feed to understand a bit of an inside joke that
what you may have just
happened.
heard.
Yeah.
In the background. All right, Kayla, let's move on to next season. Maybe we can talk a bit about the guests to begin with.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to hear about who we're going to have.
We've got some interesting people already agreed to talk with us. And one of them is Robert, the young man we spoke with, if you recall the episode where we talked about the graphic novel. And he told me after the interview that he was planning on going to a whole bunch of eco conferences this year. And I said, well, would you like to come back and tell us about those? And he said, I'd love to. So sometime late in 2024, he'll have gone to those conferences. So we're going to check back in with him about that. We've got some young adults in Ontario who, when they just were finishing high school, they were demanding mandatory climate change courses for all students. And now they've moved on to their adult lives and they're continuing that push. So we're going to talk to at least one of them. We also have Kate, who's going to talk about water conservation and how it ties in with the work she's doing in the Southeast Alberta Watershed Alliance. And she also works at a refillery, which is very cool because there's a lot of plastic and packaging saved through refilleries. So she's going to tell us a bit about that. Who else do we have?
I love refilleries.
Yes.
We also have Abe from University of Regina, who has a program called Breaking the Divide. And he and his colleagues have been working with high school students across Canada to manage the anxious emotions tied to climate change. So a bit more of that mental health focus, which is fascinating. And of course, last but not least, we'll be talking with a lot of regular youth taking small actions to mitigate climate change.
That's so important because that's the focus of this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up here today, Kayla, we should share a climate action of our own since we do that on every episode. Do you want to start that?
Yeah, I mean, I gave one before, but I'm sure I have another climate action in me. Oh, I've really tried in these last, probably 2 years to reduce the amount of fast fashion and clothing I consume. I don't think I've bought new clothes in quite a while. I don't really go shopping anymore, and that's partially because I'm lazy, and then also partially because I love the environment. So, I think other people have mentioned on the podcast, you try and do secondhand clothing shop. Make sure you keep the stuff you buy. Embarrassing confession. This turtleneck is the one thing I own from Shein, but I will say the one caveat to that is I've had it for 5 years, and I will wear it to the ground. I've already repaired it. I maybe need a new one. It's a little bit ratty, but I have used the heck out of this turtleneck. I will absolutely never be buying anything from Shein ever again.
Okay, so. There you go. For my climate action, Kayla, I'm going to make sure I use only eco-friendly sunscreens on my upper lip. No, that's not my climate action.
That's so brave of you.
That's not my climate action. We had an engineer's verdict recently where Jeff talked about turning your thermostat down at night in the winter. And in our house, we have a programmable thermostat for that very reason. But the other day I was at the Restore, another store I'll shout out to because what a great place for reusing stuff and donating to Habitat for Humanity. No, they are not sponsors of the show. But I had this programmable thermostat in my hand that was wireless. So, it's looking at me saying, you can control me from anywhere on Earth. And, that'd be cool. I could turn my heat down right now if I wanted to. And then I was thinking about it and I thought, why do I have to control the temperature in my house from anywhere on Earth? That's just going to take more energy for it to tee into the wireless system and be communicating all the time. So I put it back down. So that was my climate action the other day.
Aw, nice. Yeah, I don't know why you would need that because, why would you change it before you get home? Anyway.
Well, Colleen said the other day, if things are going to really improve on this planet, we have to ease up on our need for convenience and realize that it's just a want, not a need.
Oh, which is so hard. I want everything right now. Right now. Oh my gosh. So it is hard. I feel for everyone, but that is a good point. I know before you ask this, because I know you. I know you're going to try and ask me what gives me hope, and I'm not going to let you because I've already said what gives me hope. I want to know you, as the host, what gives you hope?
You're scooping me, I see. Okay, I'll answer that. It's actually an easy one for me because just doing this and meeting all these young people, you've heard me say this season, hearing all these stories of small and sometimes large actions, from using less toilet paper to building robots that remove plastic from water. This kind of groundswell of action really gives me hope for the future. So I'm loving doing this because it gives me hope for our future.
Aw, thanks, John. Thanks for hosting such a great podcast. I can say from probably a lot of people, it's been really wonderful to have it pop up on our feed and be able to have a bit of good news.
Well, and thank you so much for being our voice for the youth. And you've still got a lot of youth in you, so you can do this for a number of years more.
Take that part out. Do not thank me.
And if you start doubting that, I'll double your salary. How about that?
What?
In fact, I'll double it right now. I'll triple it.
Oh, it's the best day of my life.
There you go. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Kayla. And thank you, dear listener, for joining us on this ride. And for your trouble, you get 3 jobs this summer. 1, if you like the podcast, subscribe, follow our social media, and share it with others. 2, send us more of your quick fixes. We love those, and we bring them into every episode. And your engineer's verdict questions for next season. And 3, anytime you hear about a youth taking small steps to mitigate climate change, tell us about them, and we'll do our best to feature them on the show. We will be back as the leaves begin to change color. Same time, same place to hear from many more climate action figures. Until then, go figures.
Oh, that's fine. Leave it in.
This has been Climate Action Figures. Our show is produced and hosted by John Whidden. Our creative consultant is Kayla McIntosh. Our theme song is Hawaii Vacation by Tavari. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Climate Action Figures. It's all one word. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for next year, reach out at climateactionfigures@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next season to feature many more Climate Action Figures.